che bella machine. Welcome to the episode of Jay Leno's Garage. Today, one of the most misunderstood supercars. This is a 1971 Alfa Romeo Montreal. Some of you might question why I'm calling it a supercar. Well, it's got a V8 engine, 4-cam, 230 horsepower, 237, something like that. Just a wonderful little V8, 7,000 RPM red line, 5-speed transmission. When in this period, most cars were still 4 speeds. Remember, most Alfa Romeos were just 4-cylinder engines. And a lot of people think, oh, this is just 2 Alfa 4-cylinder engines put together. No, not at all. Not at all, not even close. This is a bespoke motor. To me, this is the right size for a supercar. You know, when I ride in a big Aventador or something like that, they just seem so big and wide and, well, heavy. This is, what, I think 2,800 pounds out the door, you know, loaded, which is still pretty light. Anything under 3,000 pounds is still pretty light. Disc brakes all the way around. This car was never introduced in America. It was never sold here because Alfa Romeo just couldn't get their emissions and their crash testings, and we give up. No more America. That's it. We do it. You know, they said they make a car. You like it, you don't like it. You know, this car was introduced in Montreal, hence the name. I think there's some sort of expo back in '67. Alfa Romeo displayed this as a show car, I guess. And at the time, I think, as I remember, that prototype car had a regular 4-cylinder Alfa engine, which is a jewel in itself. And by the time production came out, it had turned into this mini, I say mini supercar. This is the size cars used to be. This is a normal size for a sports car back in the 60s and early 70s. It's only lately they've gotten just so big and wide and heavy. This car was designed by Marcello Gandini, who I was proud to have here at the garage, actually, not that long ago. He came for a tour, and that was a huge honor. You know, he designed the Miura, the Countach, just one of the brilliant, brilliant designers. You can see some of the influences of the Miura, you know, the eyelashes here. To me, this is the most successful part of this car. The front end is just beautiful, and the way these eyebrows, he loves eyebrows. He had them in the Miura, remember? And those fold under, and it's kind of cool. You know, not many people know about these. I think they made something like 3,971, not quite 4,000 cars over 6 to 7 year period. The body didn't change much in that time. Didn't need to, actually. You know, it's funny, in different colors, this car looks different. I've seen weird golds and lime greens where I just go, oh God, that's horrible. The proportions look awful. Whereas this one, it does something to me. This one really looks right and sits right. I'm not sure about the tires. These are modern tires. I'm guessing the original tires were a bit taller, so it sat just a little bit higher. I could be wrong. There's just not a lot known about these here in the United States because they didn't come here. And now you can bring them in, of course, under the 25-year rule and all that kind of stuff. If you get a pre-77 or a pre-76, you can be smog exempt in California. I don't know how many are in the States, maybe 100, maybe 150 all told. It's a lot of work to get one in here because, as I said, it was never certified for America. There's no power steering. I mean, it's a proper supercar. Actually, they call it a 2+2, or I call it actually 2+0. You can't get anybody in the back seat, but it has a back seat, or I don't know, maybe you could put a child seat back there if you got a little kid. It's not a crazy excessive horsepower car. It's not some 400 or 500 horsepower beast. It's just a nicely balanced car that makes a great sound. It's one of these cars, when you're driving by yourself on a 2-lane road up in the hills of Malibu, or you know, up on the crest in Los Angeles, you're just having the time of your life because it sounds fun, and it is fun. You're competing against yourself, and that's what makes it kind of nice. I think these are the stock wheels on it. I know the wheels changed over the years, and of course the legendary Bertone badge for the designer. That's when Gandini worked for them. I mean, it's a true Italian car. I mean, people who know nothing about cars will look at this and go, is that Italian? Yeah, it is Italian. Of course, the classic wood steering wheel. This is a great period, the late 60s, early 70s, because it was that era of the old hand-built stuff, and then modern techniques were coming in. So there's a lot of things happening here. It's got the Spica fuel injection, I think that's how you say it, that Italian system. A lot of people took that off and put on Weber's, which is a shame because it was very, very good, but there just weren't many people here. You know, climb at the Shell station, you're not going to know how to fix your Spica fuel injection. They got a bad rap that way, you know. There just were not parts available. And as I said earlier, you couldn't buy one here. You had to wait until it was, you know, a 10-year-old used car, or bring it in yourself under gray market, which was something, gray market was allowed in the late 70s, I guess, or early 80s. You were allowed to bring in one uncertified car, you know, so it was just confusing. And it's a shame, and it's America's loss, really, because it really is a beautiful car. It's a car that nobody really knows about. You know, you take this to a Cars and Coffee, people go, what's that? And they get it confused with the GTV and some of the other Alfa Romeos. But I know I did. I mean, it was one of those deals where to this day, I have never driven one. I'm going to drive this in a few minutes, and you'll see what it's like. I mean, I've been a passenger in them, and I was really knocked out about how nice it was. All kinds of room inside, and it's a, you know, it's a car. Well, you don't want to parallel park it. Like I said, there's no power steering in the engine over the front wheel, so it makes steering a bit heavy. But once you're rolling over 10 or 15 miles an hour, that all goes away. You've got this duct here. I don't think this is functional. That's just style. This looks Mura, the way this door, this whole curve here, this is almost a signature for a Gandini. It has no radio because you have the engine. Why do you need the radio when you hear the beautiful music from the engine? It's silly to have the radio. Let's open the hood, show you what that engine looks like. Let's open the hood up. Now see, here's something the Italians do better than the Americans. Whenever we have a hood that opens backwards this way, like on the old Lincolns, they always go this, they open to this much, or they open to this much. So you really can't get in there and work on it. The Italians know, look, you're gonna break it, so why not to make it easy, you see? So this hood goes straight up and down. You got two lights here. So when you break down at night, you can see what you're doing. You know, this, I would call it an Italian Cobra, an Italian Sunbeam Tiger, because it's a small car with a V8, 2.6 liters, 4-cam. This is an extremely sophisticated engine. I mean, as much as any supercar like a Mura or any of those, of course those are 12 cylinders. You have 4 cams, and they're all completely different. They're not like you can, oh, put the cam from the left, and then no. I mean, every part of this car, I think the distributor runs off the lower cam there, and this is not a car your average foreign car, quote, mechanic can work on. You've got to have the experts. You've got to have, I mean, look, the cams are doing so much work here. Look what they're driving. Look at all the different things. Here's your Spica fuel injection. But nicely done, extremely compact. I mean, they get a lot under this engine compartment here. And when they're running right, they're unbelievable. When they're not running right, they're unbelievable. So you have that sort of problem. But you get the right Alfa guy. You got to have your own Tony, who came from Italy, you know. And that's really, this is one of those cars you need the Italian mechanic. But when they're set up right, well, you'll see what I'm talking about when we drive it. It's a great drive by yourself on a windy road kind of car. You don't need to race anybody or compete with anybody. And when you go to Cars and Coffee, you're not going to run into yourself in one of these, because there's so few of them in the States. And as I said, most people have no idea what it is. The most fascinating thing about this car is nowhere on the car does it say it's a Montreal. The only place it says it is on the ashtray. I don't know why that is. When the car was introduced, I don't know what the name was. It was introduced in Montreal, the most beautiful city in North America, by the way. If you've never been there, it's just incredible. And so they named the car after it. You couldn't buy one in Montreal. You couldn't buy one in Canada. You couldn't buy one in the United States. But the name sounds romantic, and the car is romantic. And as I said, it's just the perfect size. It's the size most cars should be, not taking up a lot of road space, not overtired, not big giant, just a nicely balanced package. Although I don't know how well balanced it is being a front engine car, but we'll find out. We'll find out in a few minutes here. As I said, 4-wheel disc brakes, very unique styling, just a nice looking slats here, somewhat controversial. Some people like them, some people don't. This sort of looks 240Z-ish to me, this rear quarter. If I just showed you this, hey, what kind of car is that? You might guess 240Z. Although 2.6 liter is small by American standards, that's a big engine in Italy, especially back in 1974. This was a fast, powerful car when it came out. And it's just sort of been overlooked by people, I think, and underappreciated. They tend to run in the 70,000 to 100,000, maybe 125,000. And I can't imagine that price coming down as they get rarer and rarer and as people appreciate them more. You know, they say we lust after what we saw when we were 7 or 8 years old on the street. And if you're a younger guy in your 40s and you're successful, this is the car you saw on the cover of Road and Track, and you saw them driving through the hills of Sicily and all that kind of stuff. So I think to a certain demographic, this is the car to have because it was just unobtainable. So let's take her for a ride and see how she goes. See those headlights? Alfa Romeo is the classic example of letting a car warm up. You know, this is a car when you turn the key, let the engine idle for a good 4 or 5 minutes, which seems interminable when you have to go somewhere, but it really makes all the difference in the longevity of the automobile. You know, an old Italian mechanic told me one time, and I'm sure you will let me know in the comment section whether this is true or not, that Italian cars are made in a warm climate. So consequently, the oil passages are quite small because the oil is warm and can flow easier. And when you take an Alfa Romeo to a cold climate like New England or Minnesota somewhere, and you start it up, you're forcing heavy, thick oil through a small aperture, small hole, and it's not going to flow as easy. So consequently, you can wind up starving the bearing. But if you turn it on, let it idle for a few minutes, have a cup of coffee, send an email, do something, that's probably the best way to go. Any of my Italian cars, I have a Lancia. I let the gauge get off of. I let it move. I went to the oil temperature gauge. I just want to see it move. Once it moves, I know the oil is warm enough. Okay, and I can drive it in the manner in which it was intended. You know, this is not a car you want to short shift at 2,000 RPM. It likes to rev. That's what it likes to do. And that's when it runs best. And, oh, it's just a wonderful sounding automobile. I mean, it's a little jewel of a V8 engine. Anyway, that's the reason Italian cars have an oil temperature gauge rather than just an idiot like we have on American cars. You got a big old lazy V8 with big oil passages like that, you know. Okay, the oil's going to flow. But in these small motors, oil is critical. Oil is the blood of an engine. And if it's not getting where it's supposed to go, you have, quote, organ failure. But there's a lot of gusto to this motor. I mean, it just pulls so nicely. See, the other problem with this car, when it came out, it cost more money than a Jaguar XKE or a Porsche 911. And of course, well, we have to tell you about Porsche 911's reputation for durability and reliability. I mean, people drive those hundreds of thousands of miles. And of course, Jaguar XKE, even Enzo Ferrari called it the most beautiful car in the world. Plus the fact that you had, in the 70s, Alfa Romeo dealers in America were not, well, let's just say, it wasn't like going to a Ford or a Chevy dealer where every part is on the shelf and available. There was, you know, plus they didn't even bring the car in here, so you had to be a true Alfista. Is that Alfista? You had to be a true Alfa Romeo enthusiast, I guess. And this car will make you one. And the Ralph Cramden driving position, for those of you outside the United States who don't know who Ralph Cramden was, on a show called The Honeymooners, Jackie Gleason, comedian, it was a comedy show, and Ralph Cramden lived downstairs, I guess, and he was a bus driver, and this is what, so, you know, that's where that expression comes from in America. It is the weirdest steering angle. It doesn't make any sense until you try to parallel park this car. And then you realize, oh, that's why it's that, because you can get a little more force, a little more shoulder into it. That's why you have this big giant steering wheel. I mean, I have a 356 Porsche twin cam, and it has a big steering wheel like this, and it's thin, and it's wood, which is what I love. This is just very nice. This is a very nice place to be. I mean, this engine just pulls and pulls up to about 137 miles an hour. The tank goes to $9,000, they don't even redline it. It's a car you drive by feel, and 7,000 feels about right. You know, this car is a perfect example of what fast cars were like back in the 70s. There's no traction control, there's no ABS, so you've got just the right amount of horsepower. All that you need, all that you can use. That's what's fun. You can use all the horsepower almost all the time if you want to. It's still fast by modern standards. It's not crazy fast, but it's sensible fast, you know. The tires obviously aren't going to break away from you in third gear. Like modern cars, you've got all that kind of traction control and stability, so you can't get into trouble. This is just a nicely balanced package. And once underway, you wouldn't want power steering. You got a nice road feel through the wheel. The dogleg gearbox takes some getting used to. By dogleg, that means the first gear is over here and down. And then you can shift it much like the early Porsche 901 box. It makes you think fifth gear is sixth gear, but there is no sixth gear. But even 5 speeds in 1971 was very exotic. Don't forget, it wasn't that long ago American cars came standard with a 3-speed, or a 3-speed on the floor, like Corvette for years, 3-speed on the floor. Then in, I guess, 57, the 4-speed came out. And it wasn't until much lower. When did Corvettes get a 5-speed? 80s, 90s, something like that. This had it in 1971. You drop down 2 gears, put your foot in it. Ah, che bella machine. The other fun part is the gauges are all in Italian. So in kilometers, ooh, I'm going 100. No, you're going 62 miles an hour. But, you know, you have an idiot friend, you can impress them. Look, we're going 150. Ah! I must say, it has none of the faults you might attribute to a, you know, 60s, 70s era Italian car. Doesn't overheat. Oil pressure's good. Idle it for an hour if you want. It's not going to do any harm. It's very nice. Kind of makes you wonder why Alfa didn't do more with this V8. Put it in the little Duetto or one of those, or the Giulia. I mean, it's such a jewel of an engine. I think they used some version of this in the Model 33. It's a cross-plane crank, I understand. It's just a wonderful engine. Nice and torquey, plenty of power. And it loves to rev. Red line is marked. It's just about $7,000. The one thing it does share with other supercars is it's pretty thirsty. At about 70 miles an hour and in fifth gear, you turn in, what are we looking at? Almost 5,000 RPM. So that's going to drink down the gasoline. But you don't care. Not to be sacrilegious, but this reminds me a little bit of a car called the Scarab. There was a guy that was taken years ago, 25 years ago, 240Zs and dropping in 327 Chevys, putting Weber carburetors on them and making them all. And boy, it was a wonderful car to drive. And this kind of makes me feel like that. Gearbox is delightful, works fantastic. You know, everything now has 900 horsepower, 800 horsepower. But for the most part, you can't really use it all on the street. This, you can use all the power you have all the time. That's what's fun. I mean, you know, bursts like this up to $7,000. So taking $7,000, it's just so much fun. You know, so many monocars. I love the P1, but it's, okay, you're going 150 miles an hour. This, you can enjoy the journey. You know, you put your hand on the gear shift, you put your foot in it, you feel that needle sweep around. As it gets close to 70, you can watch it go 66, 67, 68, boom, shift. And it's just a nice experience. You don't have to be the fastest guy in the block, because chances are you're not gonna be. But you can be the happiest guy in the block when you drive something like this. It's really the way the car makes you feel. And that's really the exciting part about an automobile. It's how it makes you feel when you're by yourself. Are you having a good time, or is it a lot of work? The only time this is a lot of work is when you're trying to parallel park it. Other than that, it's a dream date. Let me tell you, when an Italian girl winks at you, you're like, watch the headlights. She likes you. I like how you wear this car like a suit, you know. You get in it like a suit. It's exactly as big as it needs to be. There's no extraneous things on it, no big giant doors, no giant wing on the back, you know. It's just a sensible supercar. Mark my words, 10 years from now, people will say, oh, I remember those were $60,000 or $70,000. It wasn't that, well, it was a long time ago, but back in 1989, I bought my Lamborghini Miura, the orange, the S, for $80,000. People thought it was crazy. That's a lot of money for a, you know, what was then a, you know, an old sports car. But, you know, I think you'll see the same thing with this. I guess what I'm saying is, if you see one, buy it now. All right. Hey, we'll see you guys next week. Then I'm going to drive this thing around a little bit more. See you later.
you.